Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Out of the NFL, Zach Wilson is expected to miss the next 2 to 4 weeks with a torn meniscus and bone bruise in his knee. That has been confirmed by our senior NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. The Jets' second-year quarterback will undergo surgery to fix the issue. Now, Wilson was injured during the first quarter of the Jets' preseason opener. Joe Flacco currently listed as Wilson's backup on the latest edition of the Jets' depth chart. CBS Sports NFL analyst Charles Davis here to talk about this. Charles, first of all, your reaction. I mean, not the worst news. We were hoping that it wasn't going to be bad news, but still 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one because the worst news would have been season ending and you start over again. But 2 to 4 weeks, that means he's in line to start the season opener. But what you missed during that time with a second-year quarterback who missed time last year with injury is practice time. And the first thing I thought of is, will they be doing joint practices? I understand the Jets-Giants game, which is always the finale in preseason. There's a possibility of them getting together with the Giants and doing a joint practice or two. The reason I bring those up, that's when you get your best work as a quarterback getting ready for the preseason. Because typically in joint practices, it's your ones versus their ones. The contact may not be like a regular game, but everything else is full speed. He'll miss those reps during that time, but he should be ready for the opener. Stay sharp mentally, get those mental reps in practice, and then when he can, get back out on the field. But for a second-year quarterback, Jeremy, you want him taking every snap in practice heading into the regular season.
But if you're a Jets fan, I mean, you have Joe Flacco as your backup quarterback. Yeah. So, you know, the transition, certainly the security blanket that's there, is a decent one.
It is. It's very, very much a decent one with Joe Flacco, but you and I both know Jets fans. They remember what Mike White did last year.
Yes.
And they're wondering, where's Mike White? I believe you had mentioned me before we came on. He's third on their depth chart with Chris Streveler from the CFL and the Arizona Cardinals fourth. The big deal for them is, I think Mike White will get a lot of work now during this preseason. You know what Joe Flacco can do. He's going to be your guy if, indeed, you do not have Zach Wilson to start the season. But Mike White gets more opportunity, more practice during this time because you want to make sure that Joe Flacco's healthy in case Zach Wilson is not healthy for the season opener. So those guys below, they get the extra work. But the bottom line is, if you're a Jets fan, it could have been a whole lot worse.
You look at their schedule, too. Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati to start. 2 of those games are at home. They go to Cleveland. So, I mean, not exactly the easiest start in the world. That first 4 weeks of the season is a bit of a gauntlet there when you look at that. So, if you don't have him maybe for week 1 or week 2, I mean, how much does that impact the outlook for the Jets? I mean, they're in a tough division already. No one's picking the Jets to win the AFC East. They're not considered a team that's contending for a playoff spot at this point. But when you look at this schedule, how much does it hurt their chances if they don't have Zach Wilson for those first couple weeks in those games to possibly produce an upset?
Well, they're likely the underdog in 2 of those 3 games, Baltimore and Cincinnati, right out of the gate. Cleveland is the one that you're looking at and thinking that's your opportunity because you're likely not having Deshaun Watson based on what we've seen right now if you're the Cleveland Browns. So that's where the Jets fans are looking. Now if you're saying you don't have Zach Wilson, can Joe Flacco get you over the top in at least one of those games? I think that's where the impact comes into play. Because let's face it, they're really going to be the underdogs in most games going in.
Yes.
You add in that fact that Zach Wilson's not there, is not your number one guy, perhaps that impacts them a little bit more, especially the Cleveland game, where it looks like they'll be playing a backup as well in Jacoby Brissett.
And as we mentioned earlier, I mean, he's one of the prove-it guys on BMAC's list this year, Zach Wilson. So
yeah, listen, I just don't want to be. Am I on BMAC's list as a prove-it guy too? I want to find out because I'm going to have to up my game a little bit.
Charles, does this give you any pause if you're someone else, if you're a head coach in the NFL looking to start your QB1, and when you see something like this happen, it's a non-contact injury, so does it give you pause in terms of how much you're playing QB1 in your preseason game?
I don't think so, because I think you have to take each situation as it is and for what it's about. Veteran guys are not going to play in the preseason. We've had that established now for a number of years, right? You're not going to see Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to see Brady. You're not going to see those guys. We know that. They've proven themselves. The young guys have to get some work. I don't think any coach can second guess himself for giving Zach Wilson a few plays in the preseason. I think you have to do that. And as you pointed out so astutely, non-contact, making a cut, that can happen running in practice. I remember last year, remember the Baltimore Ravens before the season began? J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Marcus Peters, all went down on non-contact injuries. Sometimes bad luck just comes into play as well. I don't think you change what you do. I think you're smart about it. You don't play them a full game, but I don't know how you can second guess yourself getting a young quarterback a few extra reps.
Well, especially because it was first quarter too. It's not like he was playing into the third quarter of the game.
Yeah, I mean, he made a cut, and I think people say, well, get out of. Look, he made a cut. You're going to do that in practice every day, too.
CBS Sports NFL analyst Charles Davis joining us to discuss Zach Wilson out for 2 to 4 weeks with a knee injury. And they'll be discussing this more on the All Things Covered podcast. We talked about BMAC with Patrick Peterson.
Look at Patrick, double dipping. I mean, playing, talking.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys, multi-talented.
One of the latest episodes, update week 2 of Vikings camp. Pat P providing that. You can download and follow All Things Covered wherever you get your podcast audio. You can also watch on YouTube. We're following breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Zach Wilson, quarterback of the New York Jets, expected to miss the next 2 to 4 weeks with a torn meniscus and a bone bruise in his knee. It's been confirmed by our senior NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Now, the Jets' second-year quarterback will undergo surgery to fix the issue. Wilson, of course, injured during the first quarter of New York's preseason opener. Joe Flacco is currently listed as Wilson's backup on the latest edition of the Jets' depth chart. Mike White listed as third. As you take a look at Zach Wilson's numbers from his rookie season in 2021, before he was injured and after he was injured, of course, he missed 4 games with that sprained knee. 1-5 before, 2-5 afterwards. One of the guys on BMAC's Prove It list for 2022. Certainly not the best start for Zach Wilson. He's going to miss the next 2 to 4 weeks, but our Charles Davis saying he could be ready for the season opener. They face the Baltimore Ravens in week 1. So fantasy-wise, how does this impact things? Let's bring in Heath Cummings for a little discussion on that. Heath, obviously, Zach Wilson, not necessarily a guy you're drafting as QB1, but how does this injury affect the weapons around him?
Yeah, and it has a little effect on Wilson himself in 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues. He was one of those guys you draft as a low-end number 2 quarterback, and he wasn't in the Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence range of upside, but maybe not far from that Tua Tagovailoa range, where there was still some hope because of the way he ran that he could be a productive QB2. Now I think in those leagues you have to drop him down to strictly a bench quarterback, even in 2 quarterback leagues. And you really have to worry. You looked at that graphic when he came back from injury, the 4 rushing touchdowns. His mobility gave him a chance to be better in fantasy than he is in real life, or at least than he has been in real life. You do have to wonder if this injury may cut back on that at least a little bit early in the year. As for the weapons, I don't know that there's a huge drop-off in an individual game between Wilson and Flacco or Mike White. In fact, last year you could make a pretty easy argument that it was better for the pass catchers when Zach Wilson wasn't on the field. But it does worry me for Garrett Wilson, for Breece Hall, the guys who are just kind of trying to work into this offense, haven't had as many reps with Zach Wilson as the other guys, and only got a combined 3 snaps with the first team last night. If anybody gets off to a slow start because of this, I think it might be those guys.
So in terms of, but when you look at someone like Breece Hall, I mean, and the running backs, would you say that it maybe gives them a little bit more value, maybe not from a receiving standpoint, but from a rushing standpoint, maybe they lean on the run game a little bit more? Or do you see this offense pretty much staying as it is, given that the drop from Wilson to Flacco might not be as severe as it would be if it was somebody else?
Yeah, they actually went more pass heavy last year when Wilson was not on the field. So I don't know. The one thing is when Wilson's not there, the other 2 guys throw to the running backs more, so that might help. But no, I don't think they'll be scared to throw the ball with the backups.
Okay, so when you look at in terms of drafting Wilson at this point, I mean, are you completely staying away from him? Are you only looking at him once the season starts and you've seen him play?
Yeah, I think you're still drafting him in a 2 quarterback league, but it's only as a backup, and you're not starting him until you see him do something well.
Anything else out of this, Heath? I mean, in terms of the quarterback position, does this provide value elsewhere on the Jets that you might be particularly looking at?
Yeah, I think that it could be a little bit of a boost to Corey Davis and Elijah Moore because those are the guys that Zach Wilson's comfortable with. So if he misses the rest of training camp, if he misses the rest of practices, week 1 or week 2, whenever he's ready to go, I think he'll lean more on those guys he already had the relationship with. So early in the season, you may see even bigger target share for Moore and Davis.
What about C.J. Uzomah? I mean, a guy that's come in, a guy that, he had a decent 2021. How are you feeling about him as you enter the 2022 season?
There's been a lot of buzz about Tyler Conklin. I'm not even sure C.J. Uzomah is going to be the best tight end on the Jets. It was a really strange thing, the contract they gave him. And Conklin actually played more snaps with the first team last night in their first preseason game. So this is a situation where I think I'm trying to watch in their upcoming games to see who the true sleeper tight end for the Jets is. But I really expect the targets to mostly go to those talented wide receivers.
All right, so striking out with pretty much any of the Jets that I wanted to feature. But Heath, I appreciate the insight. Great stuff as always. And of course, you can hear from Heath Cummings as part of the Fantasy Football Today podcast group. Of course, Fantasy Football Today airing here on CBS Sports HQ. And the podcast form you can download and follow wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, they've got tons of clips and information and the show itself available on YouTube. Be sure to check it out.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.